It is February 3rd, 1637. You are standing in a tavern in Harlem, and there is a piece of paper in your hand, on it, a contract for one Semper Augustus tulip bulb. One bulb. It cost you 5,200 guilders. A master carpenter earns 10 guilders a week. You have just spent his entire lifetime of labor on something you have never seen, something still underground, something that will not bloom until spring. The room smells of pipe smoke and spilled Genever. The man across the table is smiling. He should not be smiling. You wake before dawn in Harlem, 1636. Your name doesn't matter, there are hundreds of you. You are a tradesman, cloth maybe, or tiles, or beer. The Dutch Republic is the richest nation on earth right now, and you feel it every day in the cobblestones under your feet, in the creak of canal barges stacked with spices from the east, in the weight of silver coins that pass through your fingers more often than your father ever dreamed. Holland has done something extraordinary. It has built a financial system, the Amsterdam Exchange Bank, the world's first central bank, founded just 26 years ago. There are futures contracts, options, joint stock companies. Money is not just coins here. Money is a promise written on paper, and paper can travel faster than any ship. Your house is narrow and tall, pressed between neighbors like a book on a shelf. 3 stories, a canal below your window. In the front room, bolts of cloth. In the back, your ledger. You are comfortable, not rich. Comfortable. And that is almost worse because comfortable men look at rich men and think not far at all. Your neighbor, Jan, bought into the tulip trade 6 months ago. He is talking about a new house. You have to understand what a tulip meant in 1636. It was not a garden flower. It was a status object, the way a sports car or a painting is a status object now, except rarer. Tulips had arrived in the Netherlands from the Ottoman Empire decades earlier. They bloomed once a year. They could not be rushed. And some tulips were infected, unknowingly at the time, with a mosaic virus. The virus broke the solid color of the petals into flames, into feathers, into spectacular streaks of white and red, white and purple. These were called broken tulips. The most spectacular was the Semper Augustus, white petals slashed with crimson, each one unique. There were fewer than a dozen of them in existence. You cannot grow more Semper Augustus quickly. The bulb produces offsets, tiny daughter bulbs at the rate of perhaps 2 per year. Supply was essentially fixed. Demand was not. The wealthy had been collecting them for years, but in 1634 something shifted. The trade opened up below the wealthy. Traders began writing contracts for bulbs still in the ground. Futures. You pay now for a bulb you'll receive after the June harvest. And then, and this is the thing, you can sell that contract before June. You never need to see the bulb. You never need to dig up the earth. The paper is the thing. By 1636, the tulip trade has moved into the taverns. This is documented in the pamphlets that survive, satirical prints, moral tracts, court records. The colleges, they called them, informal trading clubs, operating in the back rooms of inns across Harlem, Amsterdam, and Keuzen. Any man can walk in. You walk in. The system is simple. A bulb still in the ground somewhere on a grower's estate is represented by a piece of paper. Men bid on that paper. The price is written in chalk on a slate board. Someone rubs it out, writes a higher number. The room cheers. You watch a weaver sell his contract to a baker. The baker sells it to a carpenter within the hour at a higher price. No one in the room has ever touched a tulip. No one intends to. You buy in. A common bulb at first, a Switzer's. You pay 40 guilders. 3 weeks later it is worth 90. You sell. You have doubled your money in less time than it takes to finish a bolt of cloth. This is where the feeling starts, the one that is hard to describe honestly. It is not quite greed. It is more like clarity, like you have finally understood how the world actually works, and it is simpler than you thought, and you have been wasting your time with looms and ledgers when the answer was always here, in this tavern, in this smoke. November 1636. The prices are doing something that no longer makes sense if you think about it carefully. so you try not to think about it carefully. A Gouda bulb sold for 45 guilders in May. By November, 260. A pound weight of Switzers that cost 54 guilders in early autumn is now 400 and more. These are real figures. They come from the surviving contract records and notarial documents that historians have studied for centuries. At the top of the market, a single Semper Augustus bulb sells for somewhere between 5 and 6,000 guilders. Contemporary accounts cite that single bulb being offered in exchange for a package including a carriage, 2 gray horses, complete harness, and a sum of cash. These were the stories people told afterward, and while some details may have been sharpened in the retelling, the notarial records confirm that bulb prices reached many multiples of a skilled worker's annual wage. You have borrowed. This is the part you will not think about at night. You have used your house as collateral, not unusual, not illegal. Many men are doing it. Your neighbor Jan has done it. The barber down the canal has done it. There is a shared madness that doesn't feel like madness because everyone is doing it together, and together it feels like wisdom. You hold a contract for 2 Admiral Van Enkhuizen bulbs and 1 Semper Augustus. On paper, tonight, you are wealthy. More wealthy than your father was in his entire life. The candles burn. The ledger glows. February 3rd, 1637, Haarlem. There is a regular bulb auction at an inn called De Groot Scout. The auctioneer calls out a lot of common tulip bulbs. Standard procedure. Someone should bid. No one bids. He tries again. Lower. Still nothing. The room is watching. You can feel the specific quality of that silence. It is not the silence of boredom. It is the silence of a man who has just noticed that the bridge he is standing on has no other side. The news moves through Haarlem in hours. By the next morning it has reached Amsterdam. The buyers have stopped buying, not slowed, stopped. And without buyers, a contract for a tulip bulb is worth exactly what the paper costs. The mechanism that created the mania now runs in reverse at twice the speed. Every man who borrowed against his contracts is now holding something worth less than the debt he owes. Every man who bought from another man on credit, and most sales in the colleges were on credit, payment deferred until June harvest, now has a claim against him he cannot honor. You go to the tavern. The slate board has been wiped clean. Men are standing very still, not speaking, doing arithmetic in their heads. You know the arithmetic. You have been doing it since you woke up this morning. The number at the end does not change no matter how many times you run it. This is the question you need to answer because it is not obvious. In a stock crash, a company may have real assets, factories, ships, patents that retain some value. In the tulip collapse, the asset was a living bulb, and the bulb was still there, underground, unchanged. The money didn't go into the bulb. It went between people. Every time a contract changed hands at a higher price, the seller pocketed the difference. The early buyers, the wealthy merchants and collectors who entered in 1634 and 1635, had already sold. They were out. They held guilders, real guilders. The men who lost were the last buyers, the tradesmen, the weavers, the bakers who entered in the final months of 1636 when prices were at their peak. They were holding contracts worth a fraction of what they paid, and they owed money they had borrowed against those contracts. Here is something the historical record makes clear, and which complicates the simple catastrophe story. The legal system largely refused to enforce the contracts. The states of Holland and the individual city governments debated through 1637 what to do. The eventual resolution, drawn from notarial records and guild documents, was that most tulip contracts were to be treated as option agreements, not binding purchase obligations. Buyers could walk away for a small penalty, sometimes just 3% of the contract price. This saved many men from total ruin. It did not save them from loss. The borrowed money was still owed. The house used as collateral was still at risk. And the men who had sold real goods, cloth, tools, furniture, to fund their contracts had sold real things, those were gone. The wealth transferred upward and outward, to the early movers, and to the notaries and lawyers who spent the next 2 years untangling the wreckage. You keep the house, you negotiate with the man who holds your debt, a merchant named in no record you will ever see, because most of these negotiations happened in back rooms, not in courts. You pay him back over 4 years. The cloth business survives because cloth people still need. You sell the loom you hadn't sold yet. You don't buy another. Jan, your neighbor, is gone by summer. He had borrowed more. His house goes to his creditor. You see his wife at the market sometimes. She does not look at you directly. The Semper Augustus, the most expensive tulip in recorded history, survives as a variety for a few more decades, then disappears entirely. The mosaic virus that created its famous broken pattern was slowly killing the bulbs from the inside. Every spectacular specimen was already dying when it was most beautiful. This is a documented fact, not a metaphor, though it is also a metaphor. By 1640, Haarlem is still Haarlem. The canals still reflect the narrow houses. The exchange bank is still open. The spice ships still come in. The Dutch Republic continues for another half-century as the dominant commercial power in the world. The Tulip Mania was a wound, but it was not, historians now largely agree, the catastrophic rupture the satirical pamphlets of the time described. It was a regional credit shock concentrated among the tradesman class. It ruined some. It frightened most. It taught no one anything that stayed taught. 20 years later in Amsterdam, men are trading futures again. The Tulip Mania of 1636 and 1637 has been told and retold for nearly 4 centuries, mostly as a parable of mass delusion, a proof that crowds go mad, that markets untether from reality, that greed makes fools of otherwise sensible men. The economic historian Anne Goldgar, who spent years in Dutch archives researching her 2007 book on the subject, found something more complicated and more human. The number of people actually ruined was smaller than the legend suggests. The prices, while extraordinary, affected a relatively narrow market of perhaps a few hundred active traders at the peak. The story grew in the retelling in morality pamphlets, in English accounts written decades later by men who had never been to Haarlem because it was a useful story. It let people point at a crowd and say, "Not me. I would not have done that." But you were there. You felt the clarity in the tavern. You felt the arithmetic change in your hands on the morning of February 3rd. And if the story has survived 400 years, it is not because the Dutch were uniquely foolish. It is because the feeling in that tavern, the feeling that this time the numbers make sense, that you have finally understood something others have missed, that feeling has no expiration date. The tulip is still planted. The spring still comes. The price is always written in chalk.